This is video 2 for slide set 1 for chapter 17, Investigative and Data-Driven Journalism. So we're going to go over here the first half of the process of creating an investigative and data-driven piece of reporting, which is how do you start and how do you carry out the investigation. So how do you start? Well, you're going to start with a hunch or a tip. Now, one thing that I really want to highlight at the very beginning is that far more of these tips don't pan out than do. Now, these stories might take a long time, and they're going to take a long time to get right, and they have to be right in order for you to go to print. We're going to cover some of that in a minute. And sometimes you're going to spend a long time on something, and you're going to be told it can't go to print, and that happens. There are often times when you're going to start a story and you're going to realize pretty quickly that even if you're right, you may not be able to prove it, and so you're not going to be able to follow it. You're going to need to follow something like the scientific method in order to make sure that you've got a story that in the end you can prove, to a pretty good degree when this goes to print, and because you are going to have to run it by lawyers before it goes to print, so you'll need to make sure that you've got the evidence and you can back yourself up. Now, one of the things about you might being right, but you might not have enough proof. I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago, there was a story that there was a hot mic moment with a journalist who was really frustrated about the fact that she had a lot of information and she had a lot of people on record about the Harvey Weinstein story. But Rowan Farrow was the one who got enough information and was able to pressure enough people to actually get it published. So how many people were working on this story at the same time or even before he was? I'm sure many. And many stories were caught and killed, which is the name of his book, is Catch and Kill, which is the practice of buying these stories that will embarrass people and buying them in order to bury them. But at times you might know that you're right, but not have enough information to have the lawyer for the publication feel like they're not taking too much of a risk in order to publish it. So that's something to keep in mind, that there are always going to be more stories not published than stories that are. But the important thing is to keep trying to bring the truth to light. So you're going to start off by forming a hypothesis. Again, this is so much like if you do take a science class, or you will have to take a science class, they're going to talk about the scientific method and that you form a hypothesis and then you have to test and see if your hypothesis is right. So you're starting off with some basis for your suspicion. This is going to be your tip that you've gotten, or this is something that you've noticed, this kind of gut hunch that you have that something, isn't right, or that something's worth following up. So you want to form a very clear hypothesis, and the reason for this is that you want to focus on the heart of the problem. It's going to clarify for yourself and for others what you need to do in order to support this assertion. You might be working with other people, and if they're clear what you're trying to prove, they're going to be able to help you a lot better. Especially if you have to go and pitch your story to an editor, it helps to be really clear on what it is that you're trying to prove. It also helps you not get sidetracked down. There are plenty of other stories that could come up, but what specifically are you trying to prove with this story? You might have one big idea and you kind of pursue different avenues, but for each story, you want to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to talk about. Now, the kind of very basic thing that you want to figure out as quickly as you can is, will you be able to support this hypothesis or quickly find out that it's not supportable straight off the bat? Remember that you do need to advocate for truth, not for your viewpoint. So even if there's evidence that goes against what you would like, you can't downplay it and you can't ignore it. If it doesn't support or contradicts your hypothesis, you need to be really clear and own up to that. Now, it could be that you've got a really good story, but it just isn't the story that you thought you were going to be telling.